Hey guys, tonight we drift into the dusty heart of ancient Jerusalem, back when the world moved at the pace of hooves and sandals, and wisdom occasionally slipped from the mouth of a 12-year-old. You're waking up in a town that doesn't know your name, but that's okay. The bread smells warm, the sky is pink, and Jesus is somewhere nearby, probably already quoting Proverbs to a confused goat. This might be one of those nights where you don't make it to the end of the story. And let's be honest, if you really were there, you probably wouldn't survive the smell of the temple courtyard, let alone the theological debates. But we're here to relax, not convert. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Maybe we'll build a sleepy map of the world together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the faint sound of temple bells chiming somewhere beyond the hills. The air smells faintly of warm ash and wild thyme. Around you, travelers are beginning to stir. Blankets, rustle sandals, slap against dry ground, and someone nearby is already chewing noisily on something crunchy and vaguely date-shaped. You're camped just outside Jerusalem, the holy city wrapped in the hush of early morning. You've come here as part of the yearly pilgrimage for Passover. Everyone does it. It's tradition. It's duty. And let's be honest, it's also just nice to get out of Nazareth once in a while. You rub your eyes and notice Jesus, already awake, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock, tracing letters in the dust with a stick. Hebrew letters. Neat ones. The kind that make you feel like maybe you should have paid more attention during synagogue lessons. He's 12, still short, but something about the way he moves this morning makes it clear he's thinking bigger than most. The grown-ups begin to pack up clay jars or sealed woven bags thrown over backs, and somebody accidentally steps on a boiled egg. There's always one. You stretch. The morning is cool, and the ground under your blanket has left a lumpy impression along your shoulder. You can hear Jerusalem's life, awakening beyond the ridge. Bells again, animal calls, hammering, the faint, distinct sound of a camel sneezing. The walk into the city is only about a mile, but it's uphill, and your sandals weren't designed for incline. As the road curves around olive trees and low stone fences, the city slowly reveals itself. Jerusalem rises like a sandcastle, left to harden in the sun. Stone walls, sun-bleached and cracked. Wooden carts pulling past the gates. The Temple Mount looms ahead, crowned in white dust catching on every ledge like flour on an over-kneaded loaf. Jesus walks ahead of you. His stick swings gently at his side. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's usually something like, "If wisdom builds a house, do you think it uses cedar or cypress?" You never know if it's a riddle or if he just wants to build a nice house someday. The crowd thickens as you approach the city gates. Soldiers in bronze helmets stand to the side, yawning dramatically. One of them picks his teeth with a feather. Nobody pays them much mind. A side note, ancient Jerusalem gates weren't exactly grand. Some scholars suggest the smaller gates were designed not just for traffic control, but also to keep people from rushing in on horses or large livestock with opinions. Others just think they liked watching rich men duck under low beams. Anyway, the scent here changes. Less wild thyme, more human. Sweat old wine, dried fish, and oddly cinnamon. Someone is selling roasted nuts. You make a mental note to circle back. You're officially inside Jerusalem. People are everywhere. Cloaks swirl, sandals flap. Someone is juggling dates while shouting about lamb prices. You spot your cousin and wave. He doesn't see you. He's arguing with a spice merchant about whether cumin was mentioned in the Torah. It was, but probably not in that context. As you near the temple's outer courts, Jesus slows. He's watching a group of men praying at the gate. His gaze lingers, curious but calm. You think he's about to say something profound, but instead he just says, "They're offbeat." You blink. He clarifies, "They're clapping." It's not in rhythm. Right. Theology and tempo. He's always thinking two things at once. The family regroups just outside the temple. You're hot, thirsty, a little overwhelmed. Jesus is still focused eyes, scanning the crowd like he's looking for something only he can see. And then without fanfare, without fuss, he walks off, just drifts sideways through the crowd, slipping between a bread seller and a tall man carrying a goat in an uncomfortable position. You think you see him glance back for a second, or maybe not. You stretch your arms. You assume he's still nearby. Everyone always assumes that about 12-year-olds. But this is Jesus, and as you'll soon realize, he's already somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere older, and you won't find him again for a long time. You don't realize he's missing right away. The city is too loud, too bright, too everything. You're trying to keep track of your sandals and your sack of figs, and whether or not that donkey you passed just gave you a suspicious look. It's Passover season. Jerusalem is overflowing. People are camping on rooftops. Someone is roasting something that smells like lamb, but could be lizard. You regroup with your relatives under a crumbling stone archway where a man is selling water in ceramic cups. He says it's fresh from the spring. You drink it anyway. Mary and Joseph are chatting with a family from Cana, something about guest rooms, and whose nephew accidentally stole a chicken last year. Everyone's distracted. You're distracted. There are too many elbows in too small a space. And in the midst of it all, nobody realizes that one very small, very quietly confident boy has slipped out of view. Jesus is gone. It's not until the sun starts shifting westward and the city's heat turns gold that Mary squints and asks, "Has anyone seen him?" You freeze. The group freezes. The water seller freezes. Even the donkey pauses mid-snort. There's a sudden, synchronized scan of the crowd, everyone's heads whipping left and right like startled doves. But no, Jesus. Just noise and smells and a man yelling about olive oil discounts. You all start walking. The next few hours are a blur of retracing steps and asking strangers. You ask a man carving wooden spoons if he's seen a boy quoting scripture. He says, "Which scripture?" You say, "Any scripture." He shrugs. That doesn't narrow it down in this town. The main market is a maze of shouting and stepping. Fruit vendors are throwing pomegranates like they're trying to impress an unseen judge. A small band of teenagers is arguing whether the Red Sea could have just been shallow. At the time, you pause to listen just for a second, but Jesus isn't among them. You check near the fish stalls. No boy. You try the shaded alley by the spice merchant with the patchy beard. No boy. You even peer into a goat enclosure. No boy, just goats. One of them coughs in a deeply unsettling way. A woman balancing water jars on her head says she saw a boy in a clean tunic near the temple wall. He was talking to pigeons, she says. Or maybe God. I'm not sure. That sounds promising and worrying at the same time. Eventually, Joseph suggests checking with the gatekeepers. Now, these aren't guards with swords and armor. Think tired old men with eyebrows like moss and robes that haven't seen fresh dye in a decade. They're not really watching the gates. They're watching the shadows drift across the flagstones and occasionally shifting positions to stay in the shade. One of them is eating something that crunches suspiciously loud for a man with only 3 teeth. You approach gently. "Excuse me," Mary says, and the gatekeeper doesn't look up. She tries again. "Have you seen a boy? About this tall brown hair? Talks like a rabbi, trapped in a child?" The old man lifts his chin slowly. "Might have," he says. "Did he ask about Solomon's architecture?" Yes, Mary blinks. "He actually might have." The gatekeeper scratches his beard. Said something about how, if God doesn't live in temples made with hands, then why are we sweeping the floor so much? You all nod. That sounds about right. "Where did he go?" Joseph asks. The man waves vaguely toward the temple courtyard. He had that look, he mutters, like he already knew the ending. You make your way there. Now, quick sidebar. The temple complex at this time wasn't just one building. It was a whole network. Courtyards, colonnades, gates, altars, stairs. Imagine the world's most confusing community center, but holy. Some historians argue that the architectural layout itself was a kind of spiritual metaphor. Others say it was just practical. Either way, it's easy to lose someone in it, especially someone who doesn't want to be found just yet. You climb a short staircase worn smooth by thousands of feet and step into the court of the women, a broad space with stone walls surrounded by pillars. It's quieter here, but not silent. You hear distant voices, laughter, then words. Not laughter, debate, a conversation. No more like a rhythmic back and forth, like a game made of Torah. You follow the sound. Around the corner, past a scribe, unrolling a scroll. With care, you see them. A ring of older men, teachers, scribes, scholars, sitting on low stools under the dappled light of linen canopies. And there in the center, not seated on anything grand, not even standing above the rest, is Jesus, 12 years old, feet dusty, speaking calmly. And the men are listening. They're not laughing. They're not humoring him. They are, in fact, nodding. One man strokes his beard so thoughtfully, you worry it might fall off. Another leans forward, squinting like he's just seen a comet. You can't hear everything Jesus is saying, but it sounds something like, "But if David called him Lord, how is he also his son?" There's a pause. One of the older men murmurs something in return. Jesus listens, tilts his head, answers not like a child parroting memorized verses, but like someone gently nudging the conversation further down the river. A few facts drift into your tired brain. Yes, Jewish boys did begin serious Torah study around age 12, but not like this. Yes, temple courts were open to male visitors for learning and debate, but not like this. Some scholars today still debate whether this scene in the temple was historically literal or literary, a story written later to foreshadow Jesus' authority. But standing here, watching these men genuinely consider his words, you feel no need for foreshadowing. It's already happening. Jesus isn't missing. He's exactly where he meant to be. You stand quietly at the edge of the courtyard, half in shade, half in dust, not wanting to interrupt. Jesus doesn't notice you. Or maybe he does. but doesn't care right now. His focus is somewhere else, outward, inward, through time, maybe even through layers of meaning in the text itself. He's leaning forward, slightly barefoot, one hand open on his knee, the other gesturing gently as he replies to a man in blue robes with silver threads fraying at the collar. They're discussing the law, specifically the one about gleaning, how the poor were allowed to gather leftover grain from the edges of the field. Jesus is asking why some commandments were designed to make people slow down and care for each other. The scholar says something about divine justice. Jesus replies softly, "Isn't mercy also a law?" You watch the man pause, blink, and then nod like a scribe who just found a missing line in a scroll. Nobody tells him to leave. Nobody scoffs. That's the strangest part. One man shifts on his stool and says, "So then, if the Sabbath was made for man," Jesus finishes it, "then should man be burdened by it?" There are moments in life that hum not with noise, but with weight. This is one of them. You don't fully understand the discussion, but you understand the quiet around it. The way even the pigeons have gone still on the rooftop ledges. To your left, a scribe is slowly nodding, absently, curling a bit of parchment in his hands. Another man scratches something onto wax with a stylus, pausing every few words to glance up at the boy. You try to catch Mary's eye. She looks dazed. Not worried now, just stunned. Joseph stands beside her, arms folded, lips pressed tight, like he's holding back 1,000 questions that all begin with "How did he?" You're not sure what to do. Interrupt. Step forward. Pull him away. But before anything happens, something deeply mundane breaks. The moment your stomach growls loudly, Jesus glances over. He smiles. Not mockingly, more like "You're still in a body, remember?" You blush and take a step back, nearly colliding with a stone basin that may or may not be ceremonial. Probably best not to touch anything. Meanwhile, someone nearby offers the boy a small parcel, dates wrapped in soft papyrus leaf, still warm from the sun. He accepts them with thanks and eats slowly, still mid-discussion. It's a quiet kindness. Nobody scolds him for eating during theological debate. Nobody tells him to hush. Small cultural side note. In the first century Jewish tradition, eating and learning weren't strictly separate. Teachers would often nibble or sip as they spoke. The mind feeds, the body follows. And sometimes, if you were lucky, someone brought honey cakes, but Jesus forgot his lunch, or maybe left it on purpose. The man in blue shifts the topic. Now they're talking metaphors, specifically the ones about vines and branches. The older man asks, "If the people are the vineyard, who tends the soil?" Jesus replies, without blinking, "The one who sees the fruit before the seed falls." You see the man lean back like he's been tapped by lightning. You're not even sure what that meant, and it still gave you goosebumps. One of the other scholars leans over and whispers to a companion, "Is this child quoting commentary or inventing it?" The companion responds, "Either way, I'm writing it down." Somewhere behind you, a pigeon coos so dramatically, it sounds like it's judging everyone in the room. The sun overhead shifts slightly, casting new lines of light through the linen canopy above the courtyard. Dust glows in the air like gold ash, catching on shoulders, scrolls, and the single strand of hair that always curls in front of Jesus' ear. You notice how calm he is. Not nervous, not proud, just steady. If anyone else had wandered in some merchant, a Roman officer, even another child, they might have mistaken this as a school or a scroll club. But there's an undercurrent here, a sense that these older men scholars of the text teachers of Israel are hearing something that doesn't feel like it's coming from a 12-year-old. It feels older, not in a creepy, possessed sort of way, just settled, like the words were waiting for someone to say them properly, and now they've found a voice. You wonder what the gatekeepers would say if they saw this. Actually, you don't have to wonder, because one of them has just wandered into the courtyard, probably to stretch his legs or find shade. He squints toward the group of men, blinks twice, and then chuckles under his breath. That boy again, he mutters. He doesn't stay, just watches for a beat, smiles like he knows a secret he's not allowed to explain, and wanders off to find a spot under a fig tree. You lean against a pillar. The session goes on. More questions, more ideas. Someone even pulls out a faded scroll to check a verse, and Jesus corrects the pronunciation gently. One of the scholars chuckles and says, "If you're this sharp now, what will you be like at 30? Jesus shrugs, probably tired. Laughter, not too loud, not mocking, just warm. The kind of laughter you hear in late-night kitchens or over wine that's slightly too sour but perfectly shared. There's a rhythm to it all. You're not sure how long you've been standing here. Minutes, hours. The debates are like music. Now call and response slow and thoughtful. Later, a fringe scholar rumored to be from Alexandria makes an offhanded remark about Jesus maybe being a metaphor himself, that he represents something larger. He gets a few raised eyebrows. Someone coughs pointedly. It's Jerusalem. You don't toss around symbols like that without consequences, but the thought lingers. The boy isn't just clever. He isn't just precocious. He's centered, and no one, not even the oldest of them, can shake it. You cross your arms and watch the sun crawl toward late afternoon. The boy still hasn't looked back at his family. The courtyard cools just a little as the afternoon drifts into its slower, quieter phase, the kind where shadows lengthen and everyone's too sun-weary to keep pretending they're not exhausted. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. Someone nearby sneezes and apologizes to no one in particular. A teacher rolls up his sleeves, revealing arms inked faintly with notes made long ago in better lighting. Jesus is still talking, still listening, still holding the attention of men who've memorized scrolls older than the stones under their feet. You can tell they didn't plan for this. None of them woke up thinking they'd spend their day being mildly out-argued by a child with a Galilean accent and dusty toes. But here they are, listening intently, arguing gently, nodding like trees in thoughtful wind. One scholar leans in. He's the most skeptical of the group, his beard trimmed sharp, his expression carved in polite doubt. But what of Ezekiel's wheel? He asks. Was it real? Was it vision? Was it metaphor? Jesus pauses, and in that pause you feel time lean forward. Does it matter? He says softly, if it still moves us? It's not a trick answer. It's not even an answer really. But the man leans back blinking, like someone's just opened a window he didn't know existed. A few pigeons flutter down from the rafters. One lands near Jesus' feet. He glances at it. It glances back. Then without ceremony, it begins pecking at the dusty ground for seeds that aren't there. A soft moment. You step away from the pillar stretch and notice you're not the only one watching from the sidelines. Other temple visitors have paused at the edges. A few teenagers pretending to be bored. An old woman pretending to sweep nearby. One man leans on his staff and whispers to another, That boy's got the questions. Too many questions, the other replies. The first shrugs. Maybe we just don't have enough answers. Let's take a quiet detour here. Something most history books don't mention. At this time, the temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was the cultural heartbeat, a place of teaching debate, song healing sacrifice, and yes, the occasional marketplace argument over dove prices. Scholars today still argue whether Jesus' appearance at 12 was unusual, symbolic, or entirely expected. Some suggest it was written into Luke's gospel to draw parallels between Jesus and Samuel. Others think it's just a great story with a theological wink. But none of that matters to you right now, because you're here. And the boy isn't symbolic. He's real alive, dusty, thoughtful, and currently arguing about whether manna was bread or something closer to divine morning dew with carbs. Yes, that's an actual quote from him. And yes, someone is writing it down. A scribe in his 50s folds his hands. And what would you call yourself, boy? Jesus doesn't flinch, doesn't smirk. I'm a listener, he says. That's all. You smile, because that is very obviously not all. But it's a good answer. Mary finally steps forward. She's been waiting, watching, letting him have this moment. But now her fingers are twisting slightly in her robe, and there's a line on her brow that says, "We've been walking in circles for hours, and we still have 2 days of travel left." "Jesus," she says softly. He turns to her, and you see it, the shift. His posture softens, his eyes brighten. A bit of boy returns. For a moment, he's not a teacher, or a thinker, or a symbol. He's her son. "Why did you do this to us?" she asks. Not scolding, not angry, just deeply maternally exhausted. "We were worried. We didn't know where you were." Jesus doesn't fidget, doesn't panic. Instead, he tilts his head, calm as ever. "Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house?" Silence. Even the pigeons seem to pause. It's not disrespectful. It's not dramatic. It's just honest. Pure, strange, clear, and deeply confusing. Joseph exhales, rubbing a hand across his forehead, like he's trying to wipe away the moment. You step back, let the family circle close. No one tells the scholars to leave, but slowly they begin to rise, folding their scrolls, adjusting their robes, murmuring things to one another that sound like respectful confusion. One of them pats Jesus gently on the shoulder before he goes. The man with the silver-threaded robe lingers a moment longer. "You'll be back," he says. "I'm sure of it." Jesus doesn't answer, just gives a tiny nod, then looks back at Mary. You feel the weight of the moment starting to shift. You remember something small earlier. Jesus had been tracing letters in the dirt with a stick. You glance down now, and sure enough, near his feet, there's a faint shape drawn in the dust. Hebrew letters again. Shalom. It means peace. It also means hello and goodbye and a lot of things in between. The family turns to go, and you go with them, slowly, feet aching, brain buzzing, with phrases you didn't understand, but somehow still remember. As you pass back through the temple gates, you see the old gatekeeper again. He lifts one eyebrow as you pass and says, "He asked me if the hinges on these doors were blessed." You nod. That sounds about right. You descend the temple steps with the others, the sun now beginning its gentle lean toward evening, stretching the shadows long and golden. Jerusalem feels different somehow. Not just louder, though it is, but fuller. Like something important happened, and the stone walls are still deciding whether to whisper about it or just absorb it silently into their ancient layers. Jesus walks quietly beside you, not solemn, not giddy, just steady, like someone who said what he needed to say and is ready for bread and maybe a nap. His tunic is dust smudged, and there's a small scratch on his ankle from where he must have brushed past a pomegranate cart. No one says much for the first few minutes. Mary's holding her robe just slightly tighter than usual, her lips moving in silent thought. Joseph walks ahead with his arms crossed, not angrily, just thinking. You remember when Jesus was smaller, how he used to ask questions about everything. Why do goats chew sideways? Why does the moon follow us? Why do clouds move faster than people? Now his questions have changed. He still wonders, but the things he wonders about are deeper, softer, not louder, but heavier. The temple is now behind you. The street noise returns. You pass a boy chasing a hoop and an old man yelling at olives. A woman balances a clay jar on her hip and sings softly to a baby wrapped in linen. Life continues. It always does. Someone in the group offers a bit of leftover fig cake to Jesus. He smiles, thanks them, and eats quietly, like someone who's been talking for hours, but never stopped listening. You think back to the scholars, how they leaned forward, how they frowned, then smiled, then frowned again. Some of them will probably debate that conversation for months. One of them will write it down in a scroll no one reads for 100 years. Another will swear it never happened. That's how stories begin, or how they get lost. You reach the edge of the city where the buildings thin out and the dust thickens. The road back toward Nazareth stretches ahead dry and familiar. There's a moment where you pause, just before the gate, and someone asks, "So, what now?" Joseph grunts. "Now we go home." Simple, factual, comforting in a way. Jesus nods. "I like home." A donkey brays nearby, like it disagrees, possibly just hungry. The group begins the long walk north, sandals crunching against dry earth. The air still warm, but not heavy. You glance at Jesus. He's humming something low, almost tuneless, just a sound. But it fits the rhythm of your walk, the soft weight of dust rising around your ankles. Hours pass. At some point, you find yourself walking beside Mary. She's quieter than usual. Her eyes are on Jesus, and there's something behind them, 1,000 thoughts she won't say aloud. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He's different, you whisper more to yourself than to her. She nods, eyes never leaving him. He always has been. You remember something odd from earlier. How one of the scribes in the courtyard had whispered, "He doesn't speak like someone repeating. He speaks like someone remembering." You didn't understand it at the time. You're not sure you do now, but you tuck it away. The sun begins to dip lower, painting the road in soft fire. Shadows stretch long and thin, reaching for the olive trees and low stone fences that mark the land beyond Jerusalem. You stop for a rest near a fig grove. Someone starts a small fire. You're offered a place to sit, and you take it gratefully. Your feet ache. Your head buzzes. Jesus sits across from you, staring quietly at the flames. The light flickers on his face, casting strange shadows under his eyes, making him look both older and younger at the same time. Someone tries to make a joke about camels and wineskins, and it mostly lands. There's laughter light, tired, grateful. Jesus chuckles softly. He doesn't speak again for a while. Then, without warning, he says, "Do you think God ever gets tired of being misunderstood?" You blink. Several people glance up. He's not looking at anyone when he says it, just the fire. But the question lingers in the space, like the smell of burning time. Maybe Joseph says slowly, but maybe he understands that too. Jesus nods, doesn't answer, just keeps watching the flame. The night stretches on soft and uneventful. Someone unrolls a mat. Someone else begins softly singing an old lullaby about rivers and promises. As you lie back staring at the stars just beginning to bloom in the sky, you wonder how this day will be remembered. If it will be remembered, if 1,000 years from now, someone will say, "Do you remember when Jesus was 12 and went missing in the temple?" And someone else will say, "No, but tell me." Or maybe no one will say it at all. And that feels okay, because you remember and you were there. You wake before dawn. The fire is down to glowing coals. The sky still deep indigo, with just the softest promise of pink curling along the horizon. Most of the group is still asleep, curled beneath cloaks, arms tucked under heads, rising and falling with slow breaths. You hear a bird somewhere, a small one brave enough to sing before light has fully returned. You stretch your legs, feel the tightness in your calves from yesterday's climb down Jerusalem's steps, and shift on your mat. Then you notice Jesus is already awake. Of course he is. He's sitting a little ways off on a flat rock near the edge of the grove, quietly watching the stars fade. His knees are pulled up, arms draped over them, chin resting lightly. He looks peaceful, like someone waiting for something they already know will come. You quietly walk over and sit beside him. For a while, neither of you speak. Eventually, he breaks the silence, not with a question this time, but a statement. "The stars are like prayers," he murmurs, but slower. You blink. Slower. He nods. They take longer to get where they're going. You nod too, even though you're not exactly sure what that means. But it feels true. The rest of the group begins to stir rustling blankets, murmuring good mornings, fumbling for leftover bread. Joseph is rubbing his eyes. Mary is tying her hair back. Someone nearby is softly humming the same river song from last night. Breakfast is simple. Dried figs, a bit of goat cheese, some bread that's gone slightly too hard, but still does the job. You chew quietly, watching the sky shift from blue to gold. Jesus eats slowly, then dusts his hands and stands. "We should keep going," he says. So you do. The road stretches ahead, long and dusty. The hills roll gently to either side. A soft breeze moves through the olive trees, carrying the scent of old wood and crushed grass. And for the next several hours, life is very normal. You walk, you talk a little, you sweat. Jesus doesn't say anything remarkable. He just walks beside the others occasionally, offering someone a sip from his water skin or picking up a small rock and turning it in his hand deep in some private thought. At one point, someone tells a joke about a Pharisee, a Sadducee, and a fisherman walking into a vineyard. It's not a great joke, but Jesus laughs anyway. And that makes everyone else laugh too. Later, you pass a shepherd by the roadside. He's got 3 sheep, one of which looks like it's planning to mutiny. Jesus watches them quietly, then leans over and says, "That one's going to climb a rock it shouldn't." 30 seconds later, it does. You glance at him. "How do you know?" He shrugs. "I just do." And then softly, like he's talking to the wind, "Some sheep don't like fences." The rest of the day passes in a rhythm of steps and dust, and the occasional fig stop. The sun grows higher. You tie a strip of cloth around your forehead to keep the sweat out of your eyes. Someone ahead starts singing a travel psalm, and the group slowly joins in. The words are familiar, comforting, about protection and valleys and being guided. Jesus sings too, His voice is still light, not yet deepened by age, but clear, steady. Then, around midday, you reach a bend in the road where a small stream cuts across the path. It's not much, just a thin trickle of water over smooth rocks, but it's enough for everyone to stop, splash their faces, refill their skins. You watch as Jesus kneels beside the stream and cups his hands to drink. The sunlight catches the water, casting reflections across his face. For a moment, he looks like a painting, not the kind in a grand temple or on scrolls, but the kind etched into memory, soft, unshaped, real. Then he flicks a bit of water at your face and grins. You sputter. Hey, he laughs and runs up the hill. You chase him, of course, because he's still a boy, a brilliant, strange, beautiful boy, but a boy nonetheless, one who can run barefoot up a rocky hill and still shout back jokes while doing it. You catch up halfway up the incline, both of you panting. He flops onto the ground, arms stretched wide, staring at the sky. Do you think God watches us like this? He asks. You lie beside him. Like what? From underneath. From the ground. You consider this. I thought God watched from above. He shrugs. Maybe. But sometimes I think he hides in small places, just to be near. You lie there in silence for a while. The sun moves. A beetle passes by, dragging a seed pod twice its size. Do you remember everything, you ask finally? Jesus turns his head toward you. No, you seem like you do. He smiles. Some things I just remember in a different way. You don't press. You just lie beside him until someone calls from below that it's time to keep moving. You stand, dust yourselves off, walk back down to the others, and the journey continues. You're on the road again. The sun is warm, but not oppressive. The air filled with the sounds of sandals on earth, and the occasional wheeze from a tired donkey who's clearly over it. The trees cast flickering shadows across the path, and every once in a while, a gust of wind stirs up a cloud of golden dust that makes everyone cough in the same polite, synchronized rhythm. Jesus walks beside you for a while, without saying much. He's got that faraway look again, the one where you're not sure if he's thinking about something brilliant or just quietly wondering how grapes are made. A few steps ahead, Mary and Joseph are deep in conversation. You can't hear it, but their gestures are soft, like they're trying not to stir the air too much. Maybe they're talking about the temple, or maybe just about whether they left their good blanket behind at the fig grove. Suddenly, Jesus stops. He's staring at a cluster of rocks by the side of the road. At first you think maybe he sees a snake or a scorpion or some ancient treasure. But no, it's a nest, a bird's nest, built cleverly between two stones, nestled in dry grasses and twigs, almost invisible. Unless you're looking. He kneels slowly, not touching, just watching. The bird is there, a small one, maybe a sparrow, maybe not. You're not an expert, but it's hopping gently near the nest, feeding tiny open beaks, one seed at a time. Jesus tilts his head. They don't worry, he murmurs. You blink. Who doesn't? The birds. They don't worry about tomorrow. You think about that. Well, you say, trying to sound clever. They don't have taxes. He laughs. True. But they don't have barns either. Or coin. Or sandals. But they always find something to eat. You glance at the nest again. It's a small thing, insignificant in the grand story of the world. But you feel it's some quiet thread, connecting this moment to the rest. Like it matters in a way you can't explain. Jesus stands brushing off his tunic. We can go. So you do. As you walk, you recall something a traveler once said by a campfire. that every rabbi tries at some point to compare humans to birds. It's a whole genre of parable. Some scholars even argue that sparrows were used as metaphors because they were everywhere cheap and deeply unbothered by human theology. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Someone had quoted once. You think they were trying to be profound, but the timing was bad because someone was choking on lentils. Anyway, the road winds onward. In the afternoon heat, the world slows. Even the wind seems to lose its ambition. Your group moves like a stretched out caravan of half-awake souls, just trying to reach the next cluster of shade. Jesus walks ahead again. He's still small, still 12, but somehow in the quiet, he takes up more space than his size should allow. You pass a shepherd sitting under a tree, whittling a stick into a hook. He looks up, sees Jesus, and squints. That boy a student, he asks. You pause. Something like that. He's got a face like a question. You smile. He usually is one. Farther down the road, you stop near a shallow pool for water. The air smells faintly of clay and wild thyme. Jesus crouches by the water's edge again, drawing something with his finger in the mud. You peek over his shoulder. He's sketching a figure, just lines simple and faint. A man with outstretched arms. You can't tell if it's a blessing or a shrug. Who's that, you ask? He looks up. Someone I haven't met yet. Your skin tingles. The way he says it, it doesn't feel like a riddle. Or maybe it does, but one of those riddles you know won't be solved for years. You don't press further. You just sit beside him, letting the warmth of the sun soak into your bones. The rest of the group talks quietly under the trees. Mary is rubbing her temples. Joseph is negotiating with someone over a bit of bread. Life continues, wrapped around these strange little moments. Eventually, the conversation shifts to something much more pressing: dinner. Someone mentions lentils. Someone else groans. Someone says they spotted wild onions earlier. That gets more interest. You help gather kindling, while Jesus gathers a few smooth stones and places them carefully in a circle. The fire is built. The lentils are cooked. The onions are questionable, but acceptable. As the meal simmers, Jesus sits beside the pot and says, "Do you think bread ever gets tired of being compared to everything?" Everyone chuckles. Joseph raises an eyebrow. What now? Jesus grins. You know the kingdom is like leaven. Man does not live by bread alone. Give us this day our daily bread. It's a lot of pressure for one food. There's laughter again. One woman says, "It's because bread is the one thing everyone understands." Not everyone, Jesus replies. Some people burn it. A not-so-subtle look is thrown toward a cousin who once nearly lit a mat on fire during breakfast. The meal finishes. The pot is scraped clean. People begin to settle in again, tucking into cloaks, adjusting mats, sighing the sighs of people too tired to think. Jesus lies back and stares at the sky. "Do you think the stars are seeds?" he asks. You're too tired to answer, but he doesn't seem to need one. Morning comes with the rustle of fabric and the low hum of someone trying to remember a psalm before fully waking up. The fire has died down to powdery ash, and the world is tinted silver blue, the kind of quiet color that makes you whisper without realizing. You sit up slowly, joints stiff from sleeping on uneven ground, and see Jesus already awake again, perched on a boulder, like a bird waiting for the world to catch up. He's got a small stick in his hand and is poking the ashes of last night's fire, making little valleys and ridges, like he's sketching a map no one else can read. He doesn't look over, but he says softly, I dreamed I was running, but I didn't know from what or where to. You blink the sleep from your eyes. That's most dreams. Maybe he says, but this one felt like a memory I haven't had yet. You don't quite know what to say to that, so you just nod and go find the water jug. Breakfast is brief. Bread, a few olives, one or two remaining figs that someone found slightly squished under a satchel. Jesus eats slowly, savoring even the squashed fig, as though each bite is telling him something. By mid-morning, your group is moving again. The path narrows today, dipping between limestone cliffs. You have to walk single file, in some parts ducking under branches and sidestepping loose stones. The donkey has strong opinions about the pace and expresses them with the occasional full-body sigh. The wind shifts. It smells faintly of honey and sun-warmed dirt. Jesus walks behind you this time, humming something quiet and rhythmic. You think you recognize it. A traveling song maybe from the Psalms, but the melody is slightly off, like he's rewriting it as he goes. The conversation among the adults drifts toward practical things, whether there will be enough daylight to make it to the next town, whether the coins will stretch through the week, whether the last batch of lentils was actually cursed. Jesus, meanwhile, seems more interested in the patterns in the rocks. He keeps stopping to trace circles and spirals in the dust, like he's following an invisible language no one else can read. At one point, he holds up a stone and says, "This one looks like an eye." You peer at it. You don't see it. He shrugs. Maybe it's not looking at you. You pocket the stone anyway. Halfway through the day, you come across a traveler. He's sitting on a low wall, barefoot, dusty, with a pack that looks like it's seen better centuries. He waves as you approach. From Jerusalem, heading to Galilee, Joseph says. The man nods. Did you see anything strange in the city? The question hangs oddly in the air. Before anyone answers, Jesus replies, "Only everything." The man chuckles. Sounds about right. He asks for a bit of bread, and Mary gives him hers, without hesitation. In return, he tells a story about the time he saw a priest and a prophet argue over who got the last piece of goat cheese at a wedding. You're pretty sure it's a metaphor, or a parable, or just a very specific grudge. When you leave him, Jesus walks in silence for a while, then says he's searching for something, but he hasn't asked the right question yet. You don't ask what the right question is. Something tells you it's not time for that answer. As the sun begins to lower again, you arrive at a small village, not much more than a cluster of stone homes, a well, and the vague promise of bread. You're greeted by the kind of woman who could run the entire Roman Empire if someone just gave her a clipboard. She hands out water, points out where to sleep, and tells someone to stop leaning on the olive press like it's a bench built for bad posture. Dinner is lentils again, but with a touch of garlic this time, which somehow makes all the difference. Jesus eats in silence, but smiles with each bite. After the meal, a few of the local children gather near the fire. They don't know who Jesus is. They just see another kid, roughly their size, not busy with chores. So they ask if he wants to play, and he does. For the next hour, you watch Jesus race between fig trees, laughing arms stretched wide. They play a game that involves tossing stones into a circle and shouting the names of animals. Someone makes a loud, dramatic goat noise that nearly collapses the older neighbor with laughter. Jesus wins one round, then loses spectacularly the next, then sits back to let the others take over. It's one of those perfect little scenes, night falling gently, laughter echoing between stone walls, a faint trace of smoke in the air. You think if only this could be bottled, this peace, this moment. You notice one of the older children staring at Jesus. She leans over to him and whispers something. You can't hear it. He whispers something back, and she nods, as though whatever he said answered not only her question, but a few she hadn't yet learned to ask. Later, as everyone settles in for the night, blankets unfurled on rooftops, mats laid out in courtyards, Jesus sits beside the well and watches the stars rise. You sit with him. After a long silence, he says, "Some people think the sky is a dome, like the lid of a jar." You nod. "I've heard that, but maybe it's more like a curtain," he adds, waiting to be pulled back. You glance up at the stars blinking, and what's behind it? He smiles. That's the fun part. The rooftop is warm from the day's sun, and the stone beneath your mat radiates a quiet kind of comfort that no cushion could ever match. Around you, the village settles into stillness. A goat bleats once in the distance, half-heartedly. Somewhere someone is humming a lullaby you don't know the words to, but the tune feels familiar anyway. Jesus lies nearby, hands tucked behind his head, staring at the sky, as if waiting for something to move. Not a star. Something older. You're not sure when you drift off, but when you wake again it's still dark. Just a softer kind of dark. A few clouds have crept in like forgotten blankets. You sit up slowly, and realize Jesus is gone. You blink, glance around. Quiet rooftops, shadowed alleys. The well, then spot him near the edge of the village, sitting beside one of the fig trees, legs crossed shoulders, relaxed eyes open and still. You join him without speaking. He glances over and nods. "You couldn't sleep?" You ask softly. He shrugs. "Didn't want to." There's a stillness around him tonight, not like before, when he was quietly thinking. This is different. He looks peaceful, like someone who's just listened to the whole world breathe in and out, and is content knowing it survived. You sit beside him, watching the outlines of fig leaves dance against the cloudy sky. "You ever wonder," he says suddenly, "what happened to the garden?" You frown. "What garden?" He smiles. "The first one." "Ah, right. You've heard the stories. Eden, the fruit, the talking serpent. They're told with such frequency that they become background noise, a myth, tucked into scroll margins and whispered by old men at twilight. I think Jesus continues that the garden wasn't lost, just locked. For now. You glance at him, and who has the key? He doesn't answer right away, just taps a stick gently against the dirt and says, "Maybe it's not a key. Maybe it's remembering." The wind shifts. The fig tree rustles. You sit in silence again, letting the idea roll around in your head like a stone in a jar. The next morning comes like a coin dropped on stone, sudden and loud. A rooster screams. Then another one louder, like a divine echo. You groan. Jesus laughs. Back in the courtyard, Mary is already organizing the group. She's holding a folded cloak in her arms and is speaking in that calm, authoritative voice that says, "I've already asked twice, and I'm not asking again." Breakfast is bread dipped in oil, with a side of laughter as someone tries to explain a dream involving a ladder, a lion, and an overripe pear. Joseph listens patiently, then declares it theologically questionable. Jesus, meanwhile, is carefully wrapping something in a bit of cloth. You peek. It's the stone from yesterday, the one he said looked like an eye. He notices you watching. "I thought it might want to come home with me," he says, as if the stone had requested this personally. The day's walk is slower than usual. The group is tired. The road winds gently uphill. You pass the occasional shepherd, some waving, some muttering things about the weather or how the clouds look too Roman for spring. The terrain changes. More rocks now. Fewer trees. You pass a small outpost where a man is fixing the wheels of a broken cart. He's muttering curses under his breath and doesn't notice your group until Jesus walks up and crouches beside him. The man pauses. Jesus points to a loose pin on the axle and says, "Try that one." The man squints, tries it. It works. He blinks. Huh. Then, before he can say anything else, Jesus stands and rejoins the group. You raise an eyebrow. You know carts now. Jesus shrugs. Not really. But sometimes things just feel crooked. You walk on. By midday, the clouds have thinned, and the sun presses gently down like a warm hand on your back. You stop by a stream, and someone pulls out a jar of pickled garlic that has mysteriously survived 2 days of bouncing around in a bag. Jesus eats it like it's honey. You politely decline. After the break, you pass by a series of low stone walls that mark the edge of a forgotten vineyard. Most of the vines are dry now, like fingers curled in on themselves. Jesus pauses beside one. They're not dead, he says. Just resting. You look at the brittle branches and say nothing, because somehow even the vines seem to be listening to him. Then someone in the group asks, "Do you think we'll be back next year?" A reasonable question. Joseph says, "If the road holds and the skies don't close." Mary adds, "And if we still have sandals by then?" Jesus doesn't say anything. He's looking at the vines again. You think about the temple. You think about the courtyard, the scholars, the questions, the way his voice filled the space like light in a cold room. You ask, "Do you miss it already?" He shakes his head. It's not time yet. The group moves on. Later, near a bend in the path, Jesus picks up another stone. He turns it over, once nods and pockets it. "What do you do with all those?" you ask. "I keep them," he says, "as reminders." As pieces, he replies, like words waiting to be spoken. That night, you camp under a stretch of sky so clear it feels fake. The stars are bright and fierce, like they're trying to outshine each other. Someone tells a story about a traveler who once counted the stars and lost his mind. Jesus says, maybe he didn't lose it. Maybe he just left it somewhere higher, and everyone falls asleep with that sentence stuck somewhere in their chest, wondering what it meant. You wake to the sound of wind moving through dry grass, soft and rhythmic, like the earth itself exhaling in its sleep. The sky is just beginning to turn a milky blue, and the stars are fading one by one like candles, being gently pinched out by an invisible hand. Jesus is already awake. Again, this time he's perched on a ledge just above the camp legs, dangling over the edge, humming something tuneless. It might be a melody. It might just be a thought that took the shape of sound. You join him. He doesn't look over, just says, "There's a city beyond that ridge." You squint. Nothing but rock and low hills. "You've been there." He shakes his head. Not yet, but something in the way he says, it makes you wonder if yet means in this life or in the one underneath it. He finally glances your way. Do you think it's strange that people remember places they've never seen? You smile. You mean like dreams? He shrugs. Or memories that haven't happened. You don't have an answer for that, and you get the feeling he's not expecting one. The camp begins to stir. Someone coughs. A pot clanks against a stone. Mary is already wrapping up blankets, her movements efficient and quiet. Joseph is checking the sky, like he's trying to read the weather's mood. Breakfast is thin, just some leftover bread and a bit of olive paste. someone had wisely tucked away for emergencies. You chew in silence, watching Jesus smooth down his tunic and wrap his little collection of stones in a scrap of cloth. Today's path is quieter, more exposed. The hills are gentle, but the wind is sharp, whipping up dust in little spirals that chase after your sandals. You walk with your head down, squinting through the gusts, your ears full of the sound of wind and the occasional, surprised yelp from someone being pebble-slapped by the breeze. After an hour or so, the group passes a strange sight. Stack of stones, balanced on one another, just off the road, 5, maybe 6 high, carefully placed. Jesus stops, tilts his head, and says, "Someone left a prayer here." You glance around. There's no one in sight. No shrine. Just stones. "You can pray with rocks," he nods. "With anything, really." He adds one more stone to the stack, gently, almost reverently, and walks on without another word. A few steps later, someone whispers, "That's not how prayer works," but no one argues. The day passes in a kind of trance. The group falls into a rhythm, sandals crunching breaths, matching pace Jesus, occasionally humming a phrase that sounds like it was borrowed from the beginning of the world. At one point, you cross paths with a caravan headed the opposite direction. Traders mostly, leading donkeys draped in linen sacks and half-covered baskets. One of them, a man with sun-creased eyes and a face like old leather, nods at Jesus and says, "He's got a prophet's silence." Jesus responds, "Only because I've run out of fig cake." Everyone laughs. Even the donkey snorts. Later, as the sun crests high and the shadows go into hiding, the group pauses beneath a stunted tree with more attitude than shade. You sit, you sip, you listen to the wind. Jesus finds a patch of earth and begins drawing circles again, overlapping, spiraling, connected by lines. What is it this time, you ask? He considers it a map, or a seed, or a question. You grin. Those are very different things. Not always, he says. The group pushes on, and the path finally dips into greener land. You pass patches of wildflowers, stubbornly blooming. Despite the dryness, their petals like small flags, raised in rebellion against dust. Jesus stops to look at one, a single yellow bloom clinging to life on a cracked ridge. He doesn't pick it, just kneels beside it for a long time. You crouch beside him. "Pretty brave flower?" He nods. "It reminds me of someone." You raise an eyebrow. "Who?" He stands, dusts off his knees, and just says, "Everyone." That evening, you reach a small settlement, a few homes, a well, a makeshift shelter, where travelers are welcomed with the kind of warmth that doesn't require introductions. A woman offers a bowl of lentils and a story about her grandson who tried to build a boat in the middle of the dry field, just in case it rained for 40 days again. Jesus listens to her like she's the only person on earth. You watch him quietly, noticing how he pays attention, how he leans in slightly when people speak, how he never interrupts, even when the story wanders far from the point and into territories involving dreams about goats in sandals. Later that night, as stars blink into being overhead, Jesus sits by the well again. You join him. He pulls a stone from his cloth pouch and hands it to you. It's not the eye stone. It's different, smoother, rounder, warm from his hands. "What's this?" He shrugs. "Whatever you need it to be." You hold it gently. It doesn't feel special, but somehow it does. He leans back, looks up at the stars, and says, "Some people see the sky and think about heaven. Others see the same sky and think about how far away they are." You look up too. Which one do you see? Jesus smiles soft and slow. I see both. The morning arrives quietly. No dramatic rooster. This time just the hush of the world, turning toward light. The woman who hosted you sets out a small meal, warm bread, fresh herbs, a jar of something pickled that no one dares question, but everyone tries. You thank her. Jesus thanks her twice. She blushes and mutters something about good manners in strange boys. You set out again, feet already sore before you begin. The road isn't particularly rough today, just long. You pass through a valley where the wind whistles through reeds and stone, and the sound makes you feel like you're walking through a song no one wrote down. Jesus walks ahead, not far, not fast, just enough to make you feel like he knows where he's going, even if the rest of you don't. Around mid-morning, you come across a well, not a fancy one, just a ring of stones and a creaky wooden bucket tied with fraying rope. Still, it's enough. You sit while others draw water. Jesus crouches beside the well and peers into it for a long time, like he's trying to see something beyond the reflection of the sky. What are you looking for? Someone asks. He replies, the part of the sky that forgot how to be a river. You blink. You've stopped trying to figure out whether these things he says are jokes, riddles, or both. The group drinks, rests, moves on. By afternoon, the sky is thick with haze. Not stormy, just tired, like the world has been holding its breath for too long. You walk beside Jesus now. Do you ever get tired of questions you ask? He smiles. No, I get tired of answers. You laugh. Isn't that the same thing? Only when the answer thinks it's done. You both walk in silence for a while. Then Jesus points to a tree growing at a slant. It bent toward the sun and forgot how to stand straight. Still growing, though, you say. Exactly. Later, the group stops near a flat rock ledge. Someone suggests a short rest. No one disagrees. Cloaks are laid out. Shoes are loosened. Someone starts to hum again. Always humming. Always half a song from being asleep. Jesus sits with his back against a rock and closes his eyes. Not sleeping. Just resting them, maybe. You lie beside him. The world around you is still. Then softly he speaks. Do you know the story of the gate that never closed? You turn your head. Is this a real gate? Real enough. You nod. That's good enough for you. It was in a small village, barely worth a mention. The kind of place people passed through without remembering. But the gate, wooden, cracked, old, never closed. Not because it was broken, not because they forgot, but because no one ever knocked. You let the silence fill in the meaning. Jesus opens his eyes. People avoid places they don't think they're welcome. Sometimes, all it takes is leaving the door open. You think of the woman in the village, of her smile, of the bread she didn't have to share, but did. You nod. When the group sets off again, Jesus lingers behind a moment. You see him pick up a small piece of pottery, just a shard, and tuck it into his pouch with the others. How many pieces do you need, you ask? He thinks about it. Maybe one for every person who forgets their whole. The rest of the day passes slowly, like a long exhale. You pass a shepherd resting beneath a lone tree, snoring louder than the wind. Jesus pauses just long enough to move the man's staff into the shade before walking on. Later, someone asks for a story to pass the time. Jesus thinks for a moment, then tells one about a fisherman who caught nothing for years, only to one day pull up a coin, a shoe, and a mirror, but no fish. When asked if he was disappointed, the fisherman said, "No, I was just hungry. No one really knows what it means but it's strangely satisfying. Toward dusk, the path leads to a long, narrow ridge where the wind whistles through cracks in the stone. You have to hold your cloak tight. The view is vast hills, unfolding into hills, the sky streaked orange and violet. Jesus stops. He looks out, eyes distant. This will all be different someday, he says. How, you ask? He smiles. Slower. That night, camp is made beneath a rocky outcrop that blocks the wind, but amplifies every sound, every yawn, every laugh, every crackle of the fire. Mary sits close to Jesus, brushing the dust from his sleeves. You scared me, she says quietly. When, back in the temple, Jesus looks into the fire. I didn't mean to. I know, she says. But next time, say something. Anything. So, I don't feel like I lost you. He leans into her shoulder. You never lost me. And for a moment, the fire seems brighter. Morning creeps in with the quiet confidence of something that knows it will arrive, whether you're ready or not. The sky turns pale peach over the ridge, and a single bird tries out a song that sounds more like clearing its throat than music. Still, it's enough to wake the camp. You blink against the light and roll onto your side. Jesus is already up, of course, and standing near the edge of the ridge, looking out over the valley below, like someone inspecting a blueprint for a world still under construction. You drag yourself upright, groaning softly, and shuffle over to him. He doesn't speak at first, just nods toward the horizon. See that line there, he says, pointing with a slight motion of his chin. You squint. There's a road, a thin scar, cutting through fields of dry grass. That's where the Romans built the new road. The straight one. You nod. You've heard of it. The engineers came with carts and shouting and a lot of rocks. It's faster, cleaner, but less interesting. Jesus watches it for a moment longer. Sometimes I think the long way knows more. You laugh softly. It certainly knows your ankles better. He grins. The group begins to stir behind you. Mary stretches and immediately starts organizing things with the energy of someone who seems to forget that sleep is not a commandment. Joseph is talking with a younger man about the next water source. Someone's already trying to light a fire, though you haven't seen a single matchstick or spark actually work before the third try. Today's journey feels heavier. Not in your legs, though. Those ache too. But in the way the sky presses down, like something important is waiting just out of sight. Jesus seems quieter than usual, but not troubled. Just deep in a kind of thought that doesn't need words. Mid-morning, the path dips into a small valley where a few olive trees stand guard like sleepy sentinels. The air here is cooler, filled with the scent of damp earth and green things pretending to thrive. A small spring trickles through the rocks. Everyone drinks, washes faces. Jesus cups water in both hands and holds it up to the light before sipping like he's reading it first. You sit beside him, feet in the shallow flow. He leans back and says, "Did you know the temple once had a gate called Beautiful?" You nod. "I've heard of it." He smiles. No one agrees on why it was called that. Some say it was the bronze. Others say it was the way the sun hid it in the morning. And what do you say? I think beauty isn't the metal. He says it's the waiting. You glance at him. Waiting for what? For someone who believes it's worth entering. You stare at the water. You want to ask more, but you don't. Not yet. The path rises again slowly. As you walk, you pass a patch of wild garlic, and someone jokes about seasoning tonight's lentils. Jesus breaks off a sprig and twirls it between his fingers. Even bitterness can be part of flavor, he says. You consider that The next time you think about your neighbor back home, in the afternoon, you reach a small cluster of stones, arranged in a strange circle. Not a well, not a shrine, just there. Someone says it looks like a forgotten place. Jesus kneels beside it and closes his eyes for a moment. What was it, you whisper? He shrugs. Could have been anything. A promise, a memory, a place where someone said something they never took back. You feel the wind pass through the stones, soft and chill. Then he adds one more stone to the circle, just as he did days ago, and walks on. Later that day, you reach a place known for its wind, a narrow pass between two hills, where the gusts rush through like soldiers late for a feast. Cloaks flap, sand stings your eyes. A hat flies off and disappears over a ridge, never to be seen again. Jesus walks ahead of you, leaning into the wind, his small form steady, like a tree that doesn't care. It's been bent since birth. Someone shouts, "Why do we even walk through here?" Jesus turns his head, grinning. Because it teaches us to keep going, even when nothing helps. The wind howls in approval. When you emerge from the pass, the world seems quieter, softer, like the wind took all the noise with it and left you with a little more space to think. You stop for rest beside a broken wall that might once have been part of a shepherd's pen. There's enough shade for everyone, just barely. You sit, stretch, rub your calves. Jesus picks up a broken piece of pottery and runs his thumb along the edge. This was someone's cup, once, he murmurs. You nod. Everything used to be something else. He smiles, and everything still is. Before you leave, he tucks the shard into his cloth pouch, next to the eye stone, and the memory stone, and the maybe a seed stone. You think about what he's gathering. Not souvenirs, not trophies, just reminders. The sun begins to slip behind the hills as you approach a long stretch of flat land where the horizon feels too wide. You walk in silence, letting your steps fall into rhythm with Jesus' slow, steady pace. Eventually, someone starts a song, an old traveling hymn about wells and dust, and the God who watches from shadows. Jesus joins in his voice, light and clear, not leading, just harmonizing. You realize somewhere in the middle of the second verse that you've forgotten what day it is, and it doesn't matter. Tonight, the fire is small, the wind is calm, and Jesus curls up beside the stones he's collected like a boy sleeping beside his thoughts. The night is quiet, but not empty. You lie awake longer than usual, listening to the crackling of the fire and the slow, even breaths of those around you. Jesus is nearby, curled under a thin blanket, his hand resting lightly on the pouch of stones and fragments he's been gathering, like breadcrumbs through the wilderness. The stars are soft tonight, less like pinpricks and more like freckles on the face of something ancient and kind. You sit up slowly, careful not to wake anyone. Jesus opens one eye and says, "Can't sleep." You smile. "I could ask you the same." He shifts onto his back and stares at the stars. "I like the quiet. It feels honest." You nod, though you're not sure you completely understand. "I think people talk too much when the sun's out." He adds, "At night, everything remembers how to listen." You lie back down beside him, both of you staring at the sky. After a pause, you ask, "Do you think the stars can see us?" Jesus turns his head toward you. "No, but they remember us." That answer lingers long after the fire fades. By morning, the landscape has shifted again, less rugged, now more gentle. Low hills roll like folded fabric, and ahead in the distance, The outline of Nazareth begins to emerge like a memory surfacing. The group walks slower, not out of weariness, but something else. A reluctance, maybe, like everyone's realizing the journey is almost over, and no one's quite sure what to do with that. You pass a few travelers heading the opposite direction. One asks if Jerusalem is still full of goats and questions. Joseph chuckles and says, "More of both than ever." Jesus just smiles and lets the wind answer for him. Midday comes quietly. The sun is high but merciful. You stop by a thicket of trees where the shade is generous and the grass is soft. Bread is passed around, coarse, a little dry, but good with the last of the olive paste. Jesus eats while gently rolling one of his stones between his palms, like it's whispering something only he can hear. Afterward, you doze under the trees. When you wake, Jesus is sitting with Mary, leaning his head against her shoulder. She's not saying anything, just resting her hand on his hair, like she's trying to memorize the feel of it before something changes. Joseph watches from a distance, carving something into a bit of wood. Nothing particular, just letting the blade make lines that his thoughts can follow. Later, as you walk, Jesus picks up a long stick and begins drawing in the dust again. Not circles this time, lines, curves, a shape you don't recognize but somehow feels familiar. What is it, you ask? He studies it for a moment. Maybe it's the path, the one we're on, the one that's underneath it. You don't reply. There's nothing to say. Evening falls slowly, like a curtain being drawn by a patient hand. The light turns gold, then rose, then that soft blue that makes everything feel like it's underwater. Nazareth is close now. You can see the rooftops. You can smell the familiar smoke of evening fires and hear a faint echo of laughter drifting from the hills ahead. Jesus slows. He turns and looks back at the road. You've just walked long, winding, full of questions, full of stones, full of things you still don't understand. And then he looks forward again. Home, he says. And there's something in the way he says it that makes you wonder if he means this home or another one. You cross the final ridge. Just as the last light slips behind the hills, a neighbor spots your group and waves. Someone else calls out. They made it back. Children run to greet you. It's all familiar, safe, soft. But Jesus stands still for a moment at the edge of it all, as if taking a final breath before re-entering something he's been away from, not just for days, but in spirit. You walk beside him. Do you feel different? You ask. He thinks for a moment. No, he says. But the world does. That night, the family unpacks. There's dust on everything, but Mary doesn't seem to mind. Joseph starts fixing a broken stool, muttering about the neighbor boys, who must have used it as a ladder. Jesus tucks his pouch of stones beneath his sleeping mat. You lie down beside the window, listening to the night sounds of Nazareth. The creak of wood, the wind through fig, leaves the familiar hush of a town that doesn't know it's about to become a story. You fall asleep with the image of that strange shape Jesus drew in the dirt, still flickering behind your eyes. A path, a symbol, a reminder, or maybe just something waiting to be walked again. The sun slips into the house, before you do casting golden bars across the floor and warming the uneven stones, like an old friend returning after a long absence. Everything smells like home, like oil and bread, and the soft dust that settles in corners and never leaves. No matter how often you sweep, you stretch your back creaking like one of Joseph's benches and look around. The house is unchanged. A pot still sits where it always has. A faded shawl still hangs on the nail that doesn't hold anything else. properly. The rhythm of home has returned. Jesus is already unpacking. He moves slowly, thoughtfully. Not because he's tired. He doesn't seem to feel tired the way the rest of you do, but because he treats every object like it might start talking. If he moves too fast, he takes out the cloth pouch first, carefully unties it, lays the stones out one by one on a low shelf near his bed. Each piece is placed not by size or shape, but as though he remembers exactly how they sat together in the dark. You sit beside him and ask, "Do they mean something?" He nods, but he doesn't explain. One stone, small and smooth, is placed slightly apart from the rest. You point at it. That one, he tilts his head. It's the one that hasn't spoken yet. Mary passes by and tousles his hair. "Stones that speak," she says with a smile. "Next you'll be giving them names." Jesus doesn't answer, but you see the faintest grin on his face. Joseph calls from the courtyard, something about the door needing its hinge reset. Jesus rises and joins him, slipping easily back into the rhythm of home tools. Past boards held wood, measured with the quiet confidence of someone who knows how things fit together even if they aren't built yet. You watch for a while. They speak little, but their silences match. A father and son working in sync, not perfect, but peaceful. Later, you walk through the town. Nazareth is as it was, quiet, dusty, occasionally interrupted by loud geese and louder opinions. You pass the well, the bakery, the house where the man with the limp sits in the shade and tells everyone what they did wrong last week. Jesus walks beside you, waving at a neighbor, nodding to a group of boys playing a game that involves throwing stones at other stones for reasons that remain unclear. One of the boys calls out, "Back from Jerusalem." Jesus nods. "Did you see the high priest?" "No," he replies, "but I saw something higher." They laugh, not mockingly, just like kids who aren't sure what to do with someone who speaks like that and still kicks a rock just right to win their game. You head back as the sky begins to turn the color of ripe dates. Mary is grinding herbs in the courtyard. Joseph is oiling his tools. A neighbor stops by with figs from her tree. She hands them to Jesus and says, "You've grown taller." He smiles, only because the ground stayed still. That night, supper is simple bread, a bit of lentil, stew olives. You eat slowly, letting the quiet settle in like dust after a windstorm. Afterwards, Jesus sits beside the window, looking out. You sit beside him. He points to a star rising in the sky. "It's the same one that was over us on the road," he says. You nod. "Do you think it followed us?" "No," he whispers. "I think it waited." Mary comes and kisses the top of his head. "Time for sleep," she says, in that gentle tone mothers use when they know they can't really make the world slow down, but they can at least make a moment feel safe. Jesus climbs into bed. You lie down nearby, listening to the soft settling of the house. The fire sputters, the air cools. Someone in the distance plays a reed flute off-key, and it's perfect. Before you drift off, you hear Jesus speak, barely audible. "Sometimes I feel like I've already lived this." You murmur, "Maybe you dreamed it." He doesn't reply, but in the stillness, it feels like the house itself is listening. You sleep deeply, no dreams, just warmth and the quiet certainty that something sacred has passed through and stayed. You wake to the familiar sounds of Nazareth breathing roosters announcing their relevance. A pot clanging somewhere down the street, sandals brushing against dirt as neighbors begin their morning tasks. The air is cool, but friendly. The sky is pale gold, promising heat later, but not yet. Jesus is already outside, sitting on the edge of the low wall that borders the courtyard. He's holding one of his stones, the eye-shaped one, turning it slowly in the light. You sit beside him yawning. Sleep well, you ask. He nods. The night was quiet. There's something in his voice calm, as always, but with a layer of reflection, like someone who has just returned from a dream that wasn't his, but still meant something. You watch the village wake up around you. Children run past, already dusty, their energy doubling before breakfast. A man leads a cart with a limp wheel. A woman is carrying a jug of water on her shoulder and talking to herself about onions. Everything is normal, and yet it isn't, because now you've seen Jesus differently. You've seen him in the temple. You've heard him ask questions that bent time, and you've walked beside him as he noticed the world in ways that made it feel new. Mary calls from inside. Breakfast. You and Jesus go in, washing your hands at the basin by the door. The water is cold. It wakes your fingertips. The meal is humble. Flatbread oil, a little honey. But it tastes good better somehow after the road. Mary keeps checking Jesus with that quiet, searching gaze, like she's trying to measure if something changed, if something left or something arrived. Joseph eats slowly, still nursing a sore shoulder from carrying too many things too far. Jesus eats without rush, without comment, but when he finishes, he brings a fig to Mary and places it gently beside her plate. A thank you without words. Later the tasks begin. Joseph asks for help in the workshop. A bench needs repairing. A beam needs sanding. Wood shavings scatter the floor like curls of sunlight. You sit in the doorway, watching Jesus work. His hands move carefully, deliberately, not because he's slow, but because he's paying attention. He sands the wood like it might splinter if he rushes. He drives the peg with just enough force to know where resistance lives. Joseph watches too, nodding to himself. They don't talk much, but there's a rhythm in their work, soft, steady, like prayer with sawdust. At one point, Jesus turns and says, "Do you think trees remember what they were built into?" Joseph wipes his brow. "I think we remember for them." That night you walk with Jesus into the hills above the town. The sun is setting behind you, and the olive trees cast long shadows that stretch across the earth like reaching arms. You find a quiet spot where the grass is soft and the sky feels closer. Jesus lies back, hands behind his head, the stone pouch resting on his chest. You sit cross-legged beside him, feeling the breeze slide over your arms like whispered questions. "Do you miss it?" you ask. He opens one eye. "Miss what?" "The road, the temple, the everything." He thinks for a while, then says, "I don't miss it. I carry it." You nod. You lie beside him, and for a long while, neither of you speaks. The stars begin to appear one by one. Then he says something that stays with you long after the stars fade. People think the world changes in big moments, but sometimes it happens in silence, in the part where someone listens differently or asks a question they never say out loud. You look at him. He's still young, still small, but somehow the words don't sound borrowed. They sound like they came from the inside out. You sit up and look at the pouch of stones. He follows your gaze. One day he says, "I'll leave them somewhere. All of them. For someone to find." Will they know what they are? He smiles gently. They won't need to. You look out over the town. Nazareth sleeping below, wrapped in stories it hasn't heard yet. You wonder how many other villages hold boys with questions. How many courtyards sit in silence waiting to be noticed. Jesus places the pouch of stones on the ground between you, then leans back, closes his eyes, and whispers, "It's good to be home." The next few days pass with the rhythm of home, uneventful in the best possible way. The mornings are filled with the scent of warm bread and olive oil. The afternoons hum with chores, dust, laughter, and the occasional shouted correction from a neighbor who thinks he's in charge of the whole village. You settle back into life as if nothing happened, but something did happen, and you carry it now, not in your hands or in your pack, but in the way you notice things. The silence between conversations. The way Jesus still looks at puddles, like they might reflect more than just clouds. He helps in the workshop almost every morning now. Joseph seems proud, though he won't say it out loud. You can tell by the way he hands Jesus tools, without explaining anything anymore. You watch them work, a boy and a man, cutting and fitting pieces of wood, as if building something that will outlast both of them. One afternoon, Jesus is carving a simple toy for one of the neighbor's children, a wooden sheep, rounded at the edges, with a lopsided smile. He holds it up and asks, "Do you think this is what the lost sheep looked like?" You raise an eyebrow. In the story, he nods. "Well, maybe less cheerful." He chuckles. "Maybe that's why it got lost. It was looking for someone to laugh with." The days stretch long. Evenings are spent on rooftops and stone benches, watching the sky change colors like a tapestry being slowly unrolled. You begin to notice how often Jesus says nothing and how much is in that silence. It's not the silence of boredom. It's the silence of someone listening to things that most people can't hear. One evening, while the town prepares for Shabbat, you find Jesus at the edge of a small grove, picking up stones again. You tease, "Haven't you collected enough?" He smiles. "I'm not collecting anymore. I'm remembering." You pause, remembering what? He looks down at the ground, then back at the sky. How things feel when they begin. That night, as the lamps are lit and the prayers are said, the whole village seems to breathe in and out together. You sit with Jesus under a fig tree just outside the main square. He breaks a bit of bread and offers you half. It's warm from the fire. He dips his in oil, then holds it up and says, "This is what peace tastes like." You take a bite. It's simple. But yes, peace might taste like this. A few children run by, laughing. One of them trips. Jesus is on his feet in an instant, steadying the boy, brushing the dust from his knees. "You okay?" he asks. The boy nods. Jesus pats him on the shoulder. Falling's allowed. Forgetting how to get up isn't. The boy grins and runs off. You sit back down beside him. "How do you always know what to say?" He shrugs. "I just say what I wish someone had told me." The sky is almost fully dark now. Candles flicker in windows. Families gather. Songs rise, some off-key but full of love. You and Jesus walk slowly through the village, passing homes where mothers call their children in and fathers bless the bread with soft, reverent hands. As you near the edge of town, he stops at a low stone wall and sits. You sit beside him. The night wraps around the both of you, not heavy, just present. "Do you ever think about going back?" you ask. "To the temple, to that moment?" Jesus is quiet for a long time, then says, "I don't need to go back. It's still with me." You nod. He pulls out the pouch again, now worn from the journey and the dust. He unties it, runs his fingers over the stones inside, then hands you one. It's smooth, pale, not special looking at all. "What's this one?" you ask. He shrugs. "Maybe it's yours." You hold it for a moment. It's warm from his hand, solid, real. I don't know what to do with it. You will, he says. Later that night, you lie in bed, staring at the ceiling. Beams the stone cool beneath your back. The stone he gave you rests under your hand, and for the first time in days, you dream not of the temple or the road, but of stillness, of olive trees, of quiet conversations that echo louder than shouts, of stars that don't shine. They remember. You wake just before dawn. Jesus is outside again, holding another stone, but this time he doesn't pocket it. He places it gently on the ledge of the well, taps it, once like a secret signal, and walks back toward the house. You smile, because now you understand. The morning light pours over Nazareth, like honey spilled slowly across stone, seeping into every crevice with golden patience. You sit at the threshold of the house, one leg folded beneath you, the other swinging lazily in the dust. The stone Jesus gave you rests in your palm, unassuming, weighty in the way only small, quiet truths can be. You've turned it over maybe 100 times now, looking for marks, clues, carvings, something to make sense of what makes it yours. There's nothing except the fact that he gave it to you, and somehow that's enough. Inside the house creaks softly with morning. Mary is preparing something, grinding herbs with a stone bowl that makes a steady, calming rhythm. Joseph is shaving a beam with a small blade, the shavings curling like ribbons and collecting in a pile like forgotten thoughts. Jesus isn't home, not in the courtyard, not in the house, not at the workbench, but you know where he's gone. So you pocket the stone and follow the trail you now know well up the hill past the olive grove, toward the place where the wind gets caught in the grass and the world feels just slightly more awake than everywhere else. And there he is, sitting beneath the same tree as before, back resting against the trunk, eyes closed, but not asleep. He doesn't startle when you sit beside him. He just says, I was wondering how long it would take. You smirk. To find you, to hear the stone. You blink. What? He nods toward your hand. You pull the stone from your pocket. It's a good stone, you say. Very round. He smiles. It doesn't speak in words. Good. Because if it starts talking, I'm running. He laughs softly, then says, sometimes we hold on to things that remind us of something we don't have language for yet. You nod slowly, then like a memory that hasn't happened. He looks at you. Yes, he says. Exactly like that. You both sit in silence for a while. The wind picks up, brushing through the trees, stirring the dust along the path below. A group of boys is chasing a hoop down the road, shouting and laughing. Someone is calling for a goat that isn't listening. Life continues unbothered. Jesus closes his eyes again. You ask, do you think they'll ever know who, everyone, the people, what you are? He doesn't answer right away. Then maybe. But that's not what matters. What does? He turns to you, that they listen, that they look, that they choose to remember something true when the world tries to forget. You look down at your stone again. It still doesn't look special, but it feels different now, like it's holding something for you until you're ready. Jesus picks up a twig and starts drawing circles in the dirt again. The same ones he always draws, overlapping, open-ended, spiraling inward and outward like a map to somewhere no one has ever been. You point at one of them. You ever going to tell me what this means? He grins. Probably not, but you know, he doesn't deny it. Later, back in the village, there's a small commotion. Someone's sheep got loose and is currently standing on top of a low roof, like it owns the house. A handful of children are yelling advice. An old man is muttering, that this is why you don't trust sheep with opinions. Jesus watches from a distance, arms folded, amused. He turns to you and says that one's going to jump. You glance at the sheep. You sure? He just smiles. 2 seconds later, bah, thud. It lands in a cart full of straw, perfectly unharmed. Jesus raises his eyebrows. You shake your head. Stop doing that. He shrugs. Mary appears with a basket under one arm, ready to go to market. Come with me, she asks. Jesus nods and joins her, taking the heavier end of the basket without being told. You watch them walk off, mother and son, moving in rhythm, and you wonder again, not for the first time, how much she knows. That evening, you sit with Jesus near the well. The village is quieter now. Lamps flicker behind shutters. Someone plays a flute again, slightly more in tune than last time. The stars come out slowly, each one like a story, trying to remember its beginning. Jesus reaches into his pouch and pulls out one of the stones. He places it on the rim of the well. Another memory, you ask. He shakes his head. A seed, he says. It just doesn't know it yet. Then he places a second beside it, and a third. You glance at your own stone. Then, without speaking, you place it gently next to his. The four of them sit there quiet and round, holding nothing and everything. Jesus smiles, then looks up at the stars and says, "Do you hear it?" You listen. There's wind, a creaking shutter, the distant laugh of someone telling a story you'll never hear the end of, and something else, something softer, like the beginning of a song still being written. "I think so," you whisper. Jesus leans back. "Good," he says, then closes his eyes, and the stones sit quietly in the moonlight, not glowing, not whispering, not demanding anything, just waiting. The next morning the stones are gone. You're the first to notice. The four little shapes that sat quietly on the rim of the well, guarding the hush of last night's thoughts, gone. Not scattered, not stolen, just no longer there. You brush your fingers along the smooth edge of the well, as if their warmth might still linger. It doesn't. Jesus walks up behind you, carrying a small cloth bundle. He looks at the empty space, then at you, and says, "Things return to the earth." When they've finished saying what they needed to, you turn. You took them. He shakes his head. "I let them go." You sit together on the wall. The morning is soft. Someone nearby is calling to their chickens, like they're disobedient children. A few dogs bark at something no one ever sees. The village begins to stir, unaware that anything important has just vanished from the edge of a well. Jesus opens his bundle. Inside is a bit of bread, a sprig of thyme, and a folded scrap of parchment with a single line of writing. The quiet things are the ones that stay. You don't ask who wrote it, because you already know. The day unfolds like parchment, unrolling in the sun. There's a cart to help fix, so you do. There's grain to carry goats, to redirect water, to draw. Jesus helps with all of it. No fuss, no fanfare. If he's still thinking about the stones, or the temple, or the road, or the sky, he doesn't show it. But you are. You're thinking about the shape of silence, and how it followed him even here. In the afternoon, you walk with him to the edge of the village. There's a fig tree growing beside the path, one branch bent low with the weight of early fruit. Jesus reaches up and plucks one. He bites into it, chews slowly, then hands you another. You eat. It's sweet and warm and a little messy, and for a moment you remember every tree you've passed that didn't have fruit, and how you didn't mind, because this one waited. Do you think everything that matters is quiet? You ask. He wipes juice from his lip with the back of his hand. No, he says, but everything that lasts is. A soft breeze moves through the branches, making the leaves speak in whispers. You can't quite translate. Down the hill, a few of the boys from the village are building something stones, stacked like towers, a game without rules. One yells that he's the builder of Babel. Another yells back that he's the flood. Jesus watches them with a look that's not quite amusement, not quite sorrow. You glance at him. You ever wish you could just be one of them? He turns to you. I am. And though part of you wants to argue, you don't. Because maybe he is. Maybe that's the point. You spend the evening walking, not far, just through the familiar edges of home. The streets, the rooftops, the olive press with the cracked corner, the well with the missing stones. Everything is the same. Everything is not. At one point, you pass an old man sitting beneath a tree, carving something from bone. He looks up, sees Jesus, and says, "You're the boy who got lost." Jesus stops. "Not lost," he says gently. "Just late." The man nods. "Even God was late sometimes." Jesus smiles. "But he always arrived." Back at home, Mary is preparing lentils. Again, she adds more garlic this time. You sit with Joseph on the step, watching the sun fold itself into the hills. He asks, "Do you think he'll remember all this?" You look at Jesus through the doorway. He's stirring the pot, humming quietly. You say, "I think he already does." That night, you lie awake under the stars, listening for something. A whisper, a riddle, a story trying to be born. Jesus is asleep nearby, curled up like a comma at the end of a thought. The world feels paused, like a breath taken before a long sentence begins. You remember the temple, the teachers, the stones, the bird feeding its chicks, the road, the quiet, and then out of nowhere, a question slips into your mind. Not sharp, not urgent, just there. What happens next? You whisper it into the dark, not expecting an answer, but from across the room, Jesus speaks softly, almost sleepily. We wait. You don't reply. You just let those two words settle in your chest like stones on a well still patient, full of meaning you won't understand for years. The next morning, Jesus is the last to rise, which is unusual. He usually greets the sun like it's a friend arriving for breakfast, already awake, already dressed, already halfway through some thought he'll never quite finish out loud. But today, he's still curled in his blanket when the village begins to stretch and yawn its way into daylight. You don't disturb him, neither does Mary. She just glances at him once, then returns to kneading dough, her hands moving in that smooth, practiced rhythm that mothers have when their hearts are thinking louder than their mouths. Joseph says nothing, just sharpens a chisel in the courtyard, sending curls of metal shavings into a neat pile that no one will sweep until someone steps in it. You sit by the well, yes, that well, and stare at the empty space where the stones had been. The rim looks a little lonelier now, but not unfinished. Just waiting. Eventually, Jesus stirs. He walks out rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up like grass on a windy morning. You offer him a bit of bread. He takes it with a sleepy smile, then sits beside you and asks, "You ever have a dream that feels older than you?" You blink. "That's how I feel about most of my dreams." He laughs through a bite of bread. "Me too." The morning unfolds gently. A neighbor stops by with a broken stool and a long story about how her grandson insists on standing on furniture to reach the sky. Joseph listens, politely fixes the stool, and sends her off with a jar of oil for the next time he gets stuck. Jesus and you take a walk. No destination, no errands, just movement for its own sake. You talk about nothing at first, the smell of blooming thyme, the way clouds sometimes look like sheep, if sheep were enormous and on fire. He listens, laughs, makes a joke about how even clouds forget their shape sometimes. Then he says something strange. Do you think God ever gets bored? You tilt your head. Of what? Of being misunderstood. You don't answer right away, so he continues. Sometimes I wonder if God made laughter just to survive theology. You grin. Then we're doing fine. He doesn't laugh, but his eyes light up. You pass the old shepherd's wall again. Someone's added to it a few more stones, carefully balanced. Jesus kneels, runs his fingers over the new additions. They understood, he murmurs. You don't ask who. You don't need to. You continue uphill toward the olive grove and settle beneath the same tree you always do. He lies back in the grass arms, folded behind his head eyes on the sky. You do the same. A while passes. Birds chirp. Wind sighs. Then he says, You know, in the temple, they asked questions to hear answers. But the best questions are the ones you live. You turn your head, like what kind of person you are when no one's watching, or what kind of path you take when you're not sure there's a destination. He nods. Or you add why figs always taste better when you're not supposed to pick them yet. He laughs again, really laughs, and it echoes through the grove like something sacred in disguise. Later, back in the village, Jesus helps a child build a tiny house out of scraps of wood and pottery shards. He listens closely to the child's explanation about where the imaginary family sleeps, where they eat, where the imaginary goat lives. When the child asks what it's missing, Jesus picks up a pebble and places it gently at the entrance. A reminder that someone was here, he says. The child nods solemnly, as if this makes all the sense in the world. That evening, the village gathers in the courtyard near the well for a celebration, not a holy day, not a festival, just the kind of spontaneous gathering that happens when the weather is kind and the lentils didn't burn. People bring food stories, mismatched cups. Children run in circles. An older man plays a lyre with only 3 strings badly, but with conviction. Jesus sits with you on the edge of the gathering, watching it all. They don't know, you say. About what? About who you are. He tilts his head. Maybe they do. You look around. No one is staring. No one is whispering. No one is pointing at him with wide eyes and hushed awe. Does it bother you, you ask? He looks at the firelight flickering on everyone's faces. No, he says, because they know me, not the stories. Me. You sit with that for a while. People begin to dance. Badly. With joy. Jesus is pulled into the circle by a girl who doesn't ask permission. He goes smiling, moving awkwardly, but without shame. You laugh as he twirls too fast and nearly trips into the man with the lyre, who responds by hitting the same note 5 times in what may or may not be musical revenge. Later, as the fire dies down and the stars return to their quiet vigil, Jesus returns to your side, sweaty, grinning. You hand him a fig. He takes it, bites in, and sighs. It's not even ripe, he says. But it's perfect, you reply. He nods. And somewhere inside, you feel the world tilt slightly. Not because something has changed, but because you've finally noticed that it already had. The morning comes with rain. Not much, just a quiet drizzle that softens the edges of everything. The rooftops glisten. The dust settles. And the air carries that damp, earthy smell that feels like the world is pausing to wash its face. You and Jesus sit beneath the awning of the workshop legs, dangling just above the puddles, forming along the stone path. He's watching the ripples in the water, like they're sentences he's still learning to read. He says, "Sometimes I think rain is what silence looks like when it falls." You nod slowly. "It's strange," you reply. "The road was always dry. The temple was dry. But here, back home, the ground gets to drink." Jesus smiles. Maybe even the ground needs a blessing now and then. The village moves more slowly under rain. Chores are postponed. Conversations are quieter. No one wants to get wet, but no one minds the excuse to rest. Joseph's in the back, mending a cracked stool. Mary's inside, humming softly as she stirs something that smells like lentils again, though you suspect she's added a new spice just to keep things interesting. Jesus begins stacking small stones along the edge of the workshop. Nothing fancy, just a row of wet shapes, balanced with quiet care. You ask, "You still building altars?" He shakes his head. "No, just reminders." Of what? That the smallest things don't have to mean less. You let that settle. A child runs past barefoot and soaked, giggling, like someone who just outran the rules of the world. Jesus watches her go with a look that's somewhere between wonder and understanding. She's going to get sick, you say, automatically. He shrugs. Maybe, but she'll remember laughing. By midday, the rain has stopped. Steam rises from rooftops. Puddles glint like scattered coins. The olive trees shake off droplets like dogs drying after a swim. Jesus suggests a walk. You both head up the narrow path behind the village, the one that leads to the high overlook, where you can see Nazareth spread out below like a story mid-sentence. The climb is muddy, the stones slick. You nearly fall twice. Jesus doesn't, of course. When you reach the top, the view steals your words. Below rooftops, smoke curling people, moving like thoughts through the familiar shape of home. Beyond hills, and the suggestion of roads not yet taken, Jesus sits on a flat stone and pulls something from his pocket, a shard of pottery. He's been holding on to it for days. "What's that one about?" you ask. He turns it over in his palm. "It used to be part of a cup," he says. "Someone held it while they talked. Maybe about something important. Maybe not." You wait. He continues. "But when it broke, it didn't stop meaning something. It just started meaning something else." You watch the shard glint in the light edges, smooth from being carried so long. Then he places it on the stone beside him and lets it go. Not buried, not hidden, just placed like a word in the right place in a sentence. You sit beside him. Neither of you speaks for a long while. Then you ask, "Do you think people are like that too?" He glances at you. "Like what?" "Broken, but still carrying meaning." His eyes soften, especially those ones. A breeze picks up. You pull your cloak tighter. Jesus doesn't move. You ask, "Do you ever wish you didn't know the things you know?" He looks out over the hills. Sometimes he admits, "But then I remember that knowing is a kind of gift. Even when it's heavy." You think of the temple, of the elders leaning forward, of the questions, the way his voice didn't shake, the way yours did. Back in the village, a bell rings, someone calling the children in, or announcing a meal, or simply wanting to hear a sound bounce off the stones. Jesus rises. "We should go," he says. You nod. As you descend the hill, he stops once to pick a small flower growing through a crack in the rock. It's crooked, a little wilted, but stubborn. He hands it to you without a word. You tuck it into your belt, and though it's not magic, and it won't live long, something about the way he chose it, this tiny imperfect thing, makes it feel sacred. That night after the sky goes dark, and the village settles into sleep, you lie awake again, This time, Jesus isn't outside watching stars. He's asleep, and his breathing is soft, steady, like a boy, not a prophet, not a teacher, just a boy. You reach into your pocket and feel the edge of the flower still tucked there. You think about the stone he gave you, the ones he let go, the ones you haven't found yet, and for a moment, just a moment, you believe that everything broken, everything silent, everything small, is being held in place by something greater than understanding, and it is enough. The next morning, the world feels different, and yet it isn't. The sky is the same soft blue. The bread smells the same as it always does. A rooster crows with the conviction of someone who's never questioned his role in the grand design of things. But something in you has shifted, even if the village hasn't noticed. Jesus is helping Mary in the garden today. They're pulling weeds from between rows of herbs, their hands working through the soil with care, almost reverence. Mary hums as she works. Jesus doesn't speak. He just listens to the earth. You watch from the shade, picking at the end of your tunic. After a while, he looks up and says, "Weeds aren't evil." You blink. "They're not?" "No," he says, brushing dirt from his fingers. "They just grow where they're not invited." He tugs one free roots and all and sets it aside gently, like it still deserves a place, even if not here. The morning passes slowly. Joseph is mending a door frame. You help him hold it in place while he hammers in new pegs. He nods approvingly when it finally stops squeaking. That's how you know you did well. Joseph doesn't praise out loud, but he lets his silence soften at the edges. Later, you find Jesus sitting alone beneath the fig tree. He's holding another stone. You laugh softly. "I thought you were done collecting." He turns the stone over in his hand. "I didn't collect this one." You wait. "I found it in the garden," he says. Under the thyme, you sit beside him. He holds it out. It's different from the others. Flatter, darker, almost polished. He doesn't say what it means, and you don't ask. But you watch as he sets it gently on the ground beside him. Not in a row, not in a pattern, just there, like a period at the end of a thought he's still forming. Later that day, you walk with him to the edge of the village again. There's a patch of wild barley growing between two rocks. Jesus crouches down and runs his fingers through it. "See this," he says. "It's not supposed to be here." You nod, but it grew anyway. He looks up at you. That's what faith looks like. The words sit with you the rest of the day. That evening, a storm rolls in from the hills. The clouds come suddenly dark and heavy, like bruises on the sky. People rush to pull in laundry. Cover baskets secure windows. You and Jesus stand under the awning, watching the wind chase leaves across the stones. "Do you like storms?" you ask. "I respect them," he says. Then, after a pause, they remind us that the world doesn't ask for permission to change. Rain begins to fall, at first soft and hesitant, then all at once, as if heaven finally stopped holding back. You run inside laughing, soaked. By the time you reach the doorway, Jesus walks, not fast, not slow, just steady. He enters the house dripping wet, smiling like someone who just made peace with the sky. Mary hands him a towel. Joseph grumbles about the roof needing repair. You all sit near the fire that evening, listening to the storm. Jesus holds his stone again, the one from the garden. He sets it on the windowsill, where the lightning can flash against its smooth surface. Then he says something so quietly, it's almost lost beneath the sound of thunder. Even storms pass. You all fall asleep with the rain drumming softly above you. A lullaby written by clouds. And in your dreams, the stone on the windowsill begins to hum. Not loud, not literal, just a feeling, a vibration, like it knows something is coming. Not soon, but someday. By morning the rain has stopped. The world glistens. Drops hang from fig leaves like forgotten promises. The rooftops shimmer in the early light, and the well is fuller now, reflecting the sky, with a clarity that feels a little unfair. Everything looks clean, except your feet, which are already muddy again. Jesus is back at the windowsill, watching the puddles evaporate. The stone he left there during the storm is still wet, but now it looks darker, like it absorbed the night. You stand beside him. Did it tell you anything? Yet you ask. He doesn't take his eyes off the stone. It told me it doesn't want to be held anymore. You raise an eyebrow. Stones can say that. They don't have to speak, he says. You just have to be listening. When they stop needing you, you don't fully understand, but it's early and you haven't had bread yet. So you nod anyway. The day begins like many others, but this time the routine feels different. The village moves, yes, and the oven fires are lit, and the animals are loud, and someone's already yelling about spoiled grain, but there's a stillness underneath it all. A pause, like the whole world is waiting for someone to blink first. Jesus doesn't blink. He eats breakfast. He helps Joseph smooth a table. He listens to Mary tell a neighbor about a recipe she claims was given to her by her grandmother in a dream. You follow him out of the house just before midday, expecting another quiet walk, another stone, another lesson disguised as a question, but instead, he heads toward the far field, the one people usually avoid, not because it's cursed or dangerous, but because it's empty, flat, plain. It has no story attached to it, no history. It's the kind of field you pass without noticing, which, as it turns out, is exactly why he goes there. You follow. He walks slowly at first, then faster, then suddenly breaks into a run, barefoot, laughing hair, catching the wind like it's chasing him. You chase him too, though your feet are slower and your lungs complain. He runs until he reaches the center of the field. Then he drops to the ground like a stone. You reach him panting. He lies on his back, eyes closed, arms spread. You collapse beside him. Neither of you speaks for a while. Then he says, "There's nothing here." You nod, still trying to catch your breath. And that's what I like about it. He continues. No stories, no names, just space. You stare up at the sky. It's wide today, cloudless, confident, huge. It makes you feel small in the best way. He turns his head toward you. You ever wonder why people always try to name things? You shrug, so they can keep them or control them. You think about the names you know, the titles, the labels people carry like lanterns or like chains. What would happen if we stopped, you ask? He smiles. Maybe we'd finally see what something is instead of what we want it to be. You lie in the field until the sun begins to shift. Then Jesus sits up and presses his palm flat against the earth. Say thank you, he whispers. You mimic him. Hand to ground. The soil is warm, dry, alive, and even though it doesn't speak, it somehow answers. You walk back quietly. No parables today. No miracles. Just a field that no one cared about until you did. That evening, Jesus places the last stone from his pouch on the shelf beside the door. The others are gone now. Given. Left. Buried. Forgotten. This one remains. Mary notices. She doesn't say anything about the stone. She just brushes dust from Jesus' shoulders and asks if he's eaten enough. He nods, says he's full. You lie awake again that night, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the sound of the house settling, listening for something more. And then you hear it. Jesus is outside again. You rise and follow. He's in the courtyard barefoot, staring at the moon. It's different tonight, he says. When you approach, it looks the same. No, he replies. It's older. You glance at him. You mean we're older? He smiles. That too. You stand in silence beside him. Then quietly he says, one day I'll leave. You nod. I know. He continues. Not soon, but far. You ask far like distance. He hesitates, then says far like meaning. You feel the words settle into you like stones in a pocket. He turns to go back inside, but before he does, he says, when I do keep watching the quiet places, that's where the loudest truths live. And then he disappears behind the door, leaving you alone with the moon and a silence that no longer feels empty. The next morning, something's changed. It isn't the weather clear skies, still air. It isn't the village goats still arguing with their ropes. Bread still baking in the ovens. Someone still yelling across the street about a borrowed bowl. But there's something in the way people move today. A slowness, a hush that doesn't come from silence, but from knowing, though, they can't say what exactly. You see it in Mary's hands, as she folds cloth with more care than usual. You see it in Joseph, who sharpens a chisel and doesn't speak a word. And you see it most in Jesus. He's sitting outside the house at the base of the fig tree, not drawing, not collecting stones, just sitting, upright, still, like he's listening for a sound that hasn't been invented yet. You sit beside him. He doesn't turn, but you feel the moment acknowledge you. After a while, he says, do you remember when I was missing? You smile. You weren't missing. You were just elsewhere. He nods. I was right where I needed to be. But you didn't know that yet. You think back to the temple, the steps the scholars leaning forward, the way his voice held a weight that didn't match his age. It was strange, you say, like you were young and ancient. At the same time, I was. He reaches into the pocket of his tunic and pulls out a single olive pit. Not a stone, just a seed. He hands it to you. You look at it, waiting for the meaning. He doesn't explain, so you ask, what's this one for? He shrugs. Plant it. You blink. Where? Where you think it might grow. You stare at the pit, turning it over in your hand. It's nothing remarkable. Small, dry, something most people would throw away. But not him, never him. Later, the two of you walk through the village. The people greet him as they always have, not as someone special, just Jesus, the carpenter's son, the boy who fixed the neighbor's bench, the one who plays with children and says strange things that sound like riddles, except they always land somewhere meaningful. You pass by the well, still full from the storm, still clear. You glance at the rim where the stones once sat. It's bare now, but not empty. The space feels like memory, like a page turned deliberately. Jesus stops at the well and dips his hand into the water. He watches the ripples spread, then says, the surface always forgets, but the bottom remembers everything. You're not sure what that means, but you nod anyway, because you've learned that not everything needs to make sense to be true. That evening, a traveler arrives in the village, dusty, tired, wrapped in a cloak too heavy for the season. He asks for water. You give it. He asks for shelter. Mary offers a corner of the courtyard. Then, after a long silence, he asks if anyone knows the boy who spoke in the temple. Jesus steps forward. I do, he says simply. The traveler studies him. You asked a question. I still haven't answered. Jesus tilts his head. That's good. It means you're still listening. The man smiles reluctantly, but with respect. He stays the night, eats with the family, and leaves before sunrise. No one knows where he goes, but Jesus watches the horizon for a long time after he's gone. The next day, you walk together one last time through the barley field, the one where he ran, the one with no history. He stops near the center. "This is where I'll plant it," he says. You nod. He kneels and presses the olive pit into the earth, covers it gently, then places his hand over the spot. You ask, "Will it grow?" "Maybe." "What if no one waters it?" "Then someone else will plant another. Someday." You stand in the field, watching him brush the dirt from his hands. There's no ceremony, no thunder, no prophecy, just a boy who asked questions, who noticed birds, who left stones behind, and now a seed. He turns to you and says, "You'll remember this, won't you?" You nod. "Then will you?" He smiles. "I won't have to." And as the sun begins to lower, painting the field gold, the two of you walk back toward the village. No miracles, no fanfare, just footsteps in the dust, and one small seed sleeping beneath the soil. Evening has already begun, folding its long arms over Nazareth by the time you return. The sky is the color of pressed grapes, and the rooftops glow with the last flickers of daylight, warm and almost hesitant, like they don't want to leave. Someone is calling a child home. Someone else is singing a lullaby to a goat off-key but full of devotion. You and Jesus pause just before the courtyard. You both know it's the last walk of this story, not the last story, just this one. He sits on the low stone wall beside the gate, swinging his feet like he used to when he was smaller. You sit beside him, shoulder to shoulder. There's nothing left to ask, but you ask anyway. Do you feel it? He nods. The ending and the beginning. He looks at you. Always. You lean back against the warm stone, looking up at the sky. Do you think they'll ever know what happened? You whisper. He doesn't answer for a long time. Then softly, some will, some won't. Some will think they do. Some won't care. You wait. He continues. But you knew me. That's enough. And it is. Mary calls from the house. Her voice is soft, but carries the authority of every mother who's ever called a child home. From the edge of dusk, Jesus hops down from the wall, dusts off his tunic, and turns to you. There's something in his eyes, something unreadable and ancient and kind. He opens his palm. Inside is nothing, just the curve of his hand. But somehow, you know, it holds every moment you shared: the temple, the walk, the stones, the seed, the silence. You nod. He nods, and then he turns, walks through the courtyard gate, and disappears into the glow of oil lamps and laughter and lentils warming over fire. You stand there a little longer, watching the evening deepen. The field is behind you. The well is to your left. The house is full of light. The road beyond the village fades into the dark. You breathe, and with that breath, you remember the stone in your pocket, the pit in the earth, the questions without answers, the answers without words, the child in the temple, the silence beneath it all. You walk home slowly, letting your feet remember the rhythm of dirt and stone and sky. When you reach your doorstep, you pause. Then, without fully knowing why, you place one small stone, smooth, quiet, steady on the wall beside your door. You don't name it. You don't explain it. You just let it sit. Because maybe someday, someone will see it, and maybe they'll remember too. Wind down, 300 words. And now the road is quiet again. The dust has settled. The sandals are resting. The boy who wasn't lost, but simply elsewhere, is sleeping beneath the same roof where he first asked why the stars sing in patterns. The village is still. The lamps have burned low. The well reflects only the moon, now silent and full. And you've walked far tonight, not in distance, but in memory. You've followed Jesus, not through miracles or sermons, but through stillness, through dust and fig trees, through riddles and glances, through the hum of something holy hiding in the ordinary. You didn't see him raise the dead. You didn't watch him walk on water. You saw him walk beside a cart, sit beneath a tree, hand someone a stone, not as a sign, but as a question. You watched him listen to birds, joke about bread, run barefoot through a field that didn't matter until he noticed it. And now it's all part of you. So take this stillness with you. Let it echo. Let it settle like ash after fire. Close your eyes, knowing that you don't need the answers yet. Just the quiet, just the remembering, just the warmth of this night, stretching into dreams that hum with the dust of ancient sandals and soft, holy laughter. Good night from Nazareth. Good night from the temple steps. Good night from the fig tree and the seed and the well. Good night